Hello everyone and welcome back to the channel for my playthrough of a scenario from the Fires of Midway. Now I've decided I'm going to use for my demonstration piece the setup for the Battle of the Coral Sea because whether I mentioned it or not in my previous video, I'm going to gently point out that as you can see, this game has a rather large footprint. And really, for the sake of my camera and my stand has pretty decent traverse, but it's going to struggle to try and capture all of the action as it unfolds. So I decided to go for one of the smaller scenarios because that will allow me to keep things to a sensible minimum and still meaningfully show you the game's mechanics. So what I'm proposing to do is I will play through the beginning of a game and we'll just see how far we get over the next video or two. I think it will be at least two videos, possibly more. Once I've covered everything, if it's looking like the fighting's getting a bit bogged down, then I may just call it. But my main aim with this is to show you how the system works and just to give you a sense of what the gameplay is like. Now, the other decision I've made with this is that I'm not going to use the optional rules and the special historical rules, which, to be fair, mainly relate to the Battle of Midway itself rather than the Battle of the Coral Sea. So that just lets me show you the sort of brass tacks, as it were, and believe me, there's a lot of brass tacks in this game. So each game turn is divided into a number of phases, but the most important pre-game bit is what I've set up for up here, and which is probably going to consume most of this video. You'll notice I've arranged the search and destroy or SOD cards in a 5x6 search grid. Now this is basically to determine which player has the initiative, what the two sides' stances are. One player will be confident, the other will be desperate, how big their starting hands will be, whether they will have combat air patrols ready, and also, critically, who gets to decide both the weather and the location of the task forces on the strategic map. So what happens here, and this only happens once per game and then you get on with the battle proper, is that starting with the US player, each side will look at two of these cards. It's quite similar to the memory games a lot of us are familiar with. And you will then looking at the two cards you turn over. You don't show your opponent initially. You then decide as a player which card effect you want to retain. And the one you want to retain, you leave face up and you take the effect. The one you want to leave, you just leave face down. And this continues until all three cards which show enemy fleet sighted are revealed. Now, interestingly enough, given that there's three of these cards, the initiative does not go to the player who gains more of the cards, 2 out of 3, but to the player who finds the last one. And I find that a very interesting mechanic because it keeps things tight and very interesting right up to the last moment. And also, it gives both players an opportunity to really work through the different effects that this setup has to offer without actually without sort of being caught short. Like if you're really unlucky and one player and then the other in quick succession, either one player finds two of the enemy fleet cards very early on, both sides might find themselves chucked in before they're ready. And to a degree you want that for the tension, but you don't want to be thrown in too unprepared. So the three enemy fleet card mechanic works quite well. Those of you who've never seen this game before probably wondering what on earth I'm babbling on about. So rather than sort of excitedly going on about things, I will commence the search. But before I do, I'm just going to explain the layout of the game very quickly. Now, because of its massive footprint, I've had to play a bit fast and loose with the layout that the rulebook shows. But essentially, You have the Japanese task force on the left, which was their Coral Sea force, for Operation MO. The two fleet carriers, Shokaku and Zuikaku, with their assigned air wings. And up there, we've got the dinky little Shoho with her aircraft. The US task forces are here, built around the carriers Lexington and Yorktown. And down here, we have the strategic map, which would normally be between the two players. The general holding boxes, what they very dramatically call the watery grave, but it's basically for aircraft that are shot down. And the in-game holding area for the search or destroy cards. Over here, you've got the Japanese player's play sheet, which has a load of helpful information, a space to track their victory points and also their confident or desperate status, a holding area for their combat cards, and the US side, of course, has that mirrored on their end. So, on to the search. Let me just stabilize my camera. Come on, you. Now, I'm not going to be overly imaginative about this. Pretending I'm the US player, am I feeling lucky? Sorry, let me just straighten this out. It's my OCD side coming through. There we go. Right, let us try this card and this card. Now, in the search phase, you're only interested in the top left. So I've been very unlucky. I've drawn 2 empty ocean cards, so my scouts have found nothing. The Japanese player is entitled to know half of my misfortunes. I'll leave that empty ocean card up there. Whoops, sorry, camera. But the other one I'll put face down, so the Japanese player has no idea whether I did get a bad card that's not worth bothering with, or whether I'm sneakily concealing something I might want later. There's always that possibility. So moving over and pretending that I'm Japanese now, I think I will try that card and that card. Ah, curses. Our scouts are just as stressed as their US counterparts. Where is the enemy? That was very unhelpful. So what are the US going to try? They might go for, let's have a bit of, let's see if we can make a pattern. We'll go for that one, and let's leave a gap and go for that one. Ah, decisions. Okay. So the US player can now choose either to spot a Japanese destroyer and be entitled to draw 2 cards from their combat deck, or they can place some low clouds somewhere on the strategic map. Now, clouds are interesting. I mean, well, if you're a carrier commander, they are. They provide your ships with a certain degree of cover, and they force incoming aircraft to travel further if they want to reach the target fleet, which can be very useful for both sides. They are, of course, so basically they are a place to hide, but they can also be a hindrance. On balance, the US player would prefer to be a bit ahead in combat cards. So they're going to leave escort spotted face up. And remembering that there is a useful low clouds card there, they're going to put that one back. So the US draws 2 cards from the combat deck. They've got a card that helps them with bombing, beautifully named Sitting Duck, and a combat card for aerial combat. That means it's a restricted card. Only Wildcats can play that one. Cancels a zero's dice roll, grants the US player an extra dice, and if they hit their enemy, extra damage. That's a very good start. A Japanese player is hypothetically not enjoying the smug look on the US player's face. So he is going to look at that one and that one. Ah, more excellent choices. So like the US player, he's got the possibility of low clouds. He's also got the option of readying a combat air patrol, which can be quite a useful thing to do. The Japanese player is quite keen to have some protection over his fleet, so he will give an order for the Zuikaku to launch one of her Zeros, and that goes in the cap slot. Now, normally that would sit on that side of the carrier card, but as I say, my space is a bit restricted, so appropriately enough, I shall put it over the carrier rather than adjacent to it. So the ready cap card goes back face up, and like their US counterparts, the Japanese are going to put that low clouds back where it came from. Back to the US. Maybe this one and that one. Okay, bit boring. Nothing but miles and miles of featureless Pacific. Japan. What are we going to go for? How about that one and its neighbour? Ooh, interesting weather patterns the Japanese have come across. They've got low clouds and squall. Now, squalls are an interesting one because they're basically blocking terrain. Ships can move through them but cannot have planes in the air. If any planes are in the air when they enter like a combat air patrol, they must land immediately. Squalls can put fires out, but they can also have an impact in terms of ending a scenario. If you end a turn with all your ships in a squall, you've basically done a runner. A squall's probably a bit extreme for the Japanese, but they are going to place some low clouds. And looking at the map, the Japanese decide it would be a good idea. The rising sun meatballs are a bit of a giveaway. That's the Japanese deployment zone. If they have a bank of low cloud to hide behind, that could potentially be useful at the start of the scenario. So they're going to go for that. Right, back to the United States. What to do? They're going to come back to this row and take that card. And they're also going to have that one. Interesting. 2 wake spotted. They're going to place that one back, and they're going to try their best to remember there's another wake spotted up there. But that's handy. A spotted wake means another card drawn from their combat deck, and they've got lucky timing, which is a nice bombing card. Now, the cards that you draw during this phase, I should mention, are not subject to the hand size limit. So if you're lucky with your reconnaissance, you could start the game with a seriously padded hand, which is a wonderful advantage. Right, what are the Japanese going to do? They are going to go for... Let's have a look at these two. Start screaming at me, guys, if my memory is already fading and I've already looked at some of these. Okay, Japan has got wake spotted and another low clouds. So they've already placed some low clouds, but they have not yet drawn any cards from their combat deck. So perhaps unsurprisingly, the Japanese are going to opt for wake spotted. So they draw their first card from their deck and they get Mark 1 binoculars. That's a ship defense card. So, I mean, it's all right. Lets you draw 2 cards, adds a dice roll to your ship's defense against incoming bombers. It's okay. Right. Back to the United States. They're going to go for some rather widely separated ones. They'll go for this one, and they'll go for this one. And they have a low clouds, and a ready cap. Interesting choices, both of them. Given the Japs have some planes in the air and the US does not, I think as the US Admiral, I would give in to the temptation to ready some cap. So we'll put that one back face down. And as per Fletcher's instructions, the Yorktown puts up a wildcat into her cap box. Nice. Okay, what happens now? The Japanese are also going to spread themselves out a bit. They'll take that one. And they will take this one. Okay. Bit of a no-brainer. They'll leave the empty ocean card. They will take advantage of the escort spotted. Good going, those float planes. So that entitles them to draw 2 cards from the combat deck, and they've got two bomber support cards, Ship Slayer and Explosive Return. Those are very good for their torpedo bombers. So that's a nice combo to have in their hand there. So back to the US. Decisions. And also, equally importantly, what the heck have I already looked at and put back down? Do you know what? Guys, as an aside, I really struggle when I'm playing this game against a human and just doing one side. Trying to do this memory game pretending I'm 2 people is really messing with my head. So this is probably going to be a bit entertaining for you. But anyway, the US needs to make some decisions, so they will. They're going to go for that, and they're going to try this one. That was a good choice. The first of the enemy fleet cards has revealed itself. So that's nice. Well, they're obviously not going to bother with that one. Now, sometimes if you wanted to deceive your opponent, you could not bother with that one, especially if the other card was something you desperately wanted in the short term. But it is risky because sometimes you run the risk of losing that. But the US is going to seize it gleefully with both hands and draw 3 cards from their combat deck, and they get Bloody Carnage. Best Shot, I like that. Wonderful nod to Dick Best. And Thatch Weave, and a wonderful nod to Jimmy Thatch, although I see they've misspelled his name. Whoops. Right. Japanese have a bit of stimulus now. The US reconnaissance planes have sighted their fleet. This is really not good. So they're going to go for this one, and they're going to go for that one. Another slightly tough choice. They do sort of want to continue concealing their fleet behind a bank of low clouds, but they also really want more cards. So they're going to go for the more cards option. And it gives them close escorts. Why not? Why not? So back to the US. They are going to go for that one. And they'll go for this one. Oh my words, the US Navy is on a roll. The second enemy fleet card has been found. Well, the boys in their Dauntlesses are earning their pay today, and they grant their fleet racing to the deck, rolling dive, and barrel weave. Okay, those will come in useful later. Right, the increasingly agitated Admiral Takagi, who is trying not to show his agitation right now, is going to have a very deep think for all of 2 or 3 seconds and decide he is going to go for that one and that one. Terrible, terrible choices. So he's going to stick with Empty Ocean for that one and put the other one back. The US is going to go for that one and that one. Okay, so they have an empty ocean and low clouds. Well, that is, again, a bit of a no-brainer. Like their Japanese colleagues, they are going to take advantage of the weather and basically mimic the Japanese in placing some nice defensive cloud formations just in front of their deployment area, just to give themselves the options. They may or may not want to make use of them, but it's good to have the choice. So they're quite happy with that. Would have been nice to have spotted the enemy fleet again, but never mind. So the Japanese are going to go for this card and that card. Oh my goodness! The Japanese have got it. And before the US fleet gets up to any other mischief, they're going to ignore the low clouds, because having the third enemy fleet sighted is the priceless gem that I mentioned earlier. So two things happen. First, the Japanese gleefully draw 3 cards from their combat deck. Not sure if that's how you spell samurai, but never mind. Yep, those are all nice dogfighting cards, so those will come in handy later. But also that ends the search phase, because the third enemy fleet card has been found. So the immediate effect is the Japanese player is confident and the US player is desperate. Now, being confident gives the Japanese an additional victory point straight away. And bearing in mind the scenario intensity is 7, which means that when a player hits 7 victory points, the scenario will end. The Japanese have 2 out of 7 already. So Admiral Fletcher, because he is desperate, can ignore his doctrine. He is not compelled to include the rather vulnerable Devastator torpedo bombers in his airstrikes. That will change if the Americans get the upper hand in the battle and they become the confident ones. Admiral Takagi, because he is confident, is bound by his doctrine. So when it comes to his carriers taking action, save the ship cannot be chosen. This could be problematic if his carriers take damage. There's something very aggressively Japanese about it, but it does make them vulnerable. Also, the desperation of the US means that they have a maximum hand size of 9 cards, whereas the Japanese have 7. So what other effects does this have? Well, we now turn our attention back to the strategic map. In the basic game, without the historical or advanced rules, a maximum of 2 carriers or carrier task forces can occupy each space. Well, I say task forces, really it's carrier and its immediate escorts. So the Japanese are going to stick with history and have Shokaku and Zuikaku together in a single force, with poor dear little Shoho off on her own. The United States are going to follow their preferred doctrine of keeping some distance between their forces. Now, once the players have made these decisions, the confident player gets to place everybody's task forces. So the Japanese player is going to attempt to catch the Americans separated and isolated by putting the Yorktown there and the Lexington over there. Now, this may be a good idea, it may not be, we'll have to see. He then places his own ships, and deciding that he might want that little bit of extra punch, he will have, in favouring one side over the other, he'll have Shokaku and Zuikaku over there, and Shoho out in front as a sort of early warning ship come speed bump. So there we go. The setup is ready for the Battle of the Coral Sea. Now it's already been a bit of a longish video, so I'm going to call it there because it'll save you watching me tidy this lot up and similarly prepare the battlefield for the action that is to come. But I quite enjoyed that. I always find the search phase a very tense period, even though it's a bit of a sort of it's a memory come guided luck game, but it still gets you some wonderful nail biting moments. And it certainly hasn't let me down today. I love that the United States got the first two enemy fleet cards, and then the Japanese raced and beat them to getting the third one. This wasn't scripted, by the way. As you can probably tell from the very unprofessional presentation, my videos never are. So I honestly did not know that that was going to happen. But it was a splendid demo of how this element of the game works. So both fleets are now aware of the other's positions, or at least as best you can be in May 1942. The aircraft are being fueled and armed and manhandled up to the flight deck from their hangars, and the pilots are in their ready rooms. So we're going to see what happens when the Battle of the Coral Sea gets going in the next video. But for now, I would just like to say a huge thank you to all of you for watching this video. As always, it's a huge pleasure having your company, and thank you so much for sticking with this series and for your interest in this game. To all my long-suffering veterans, a huge hello, as always. It's really fantastic to see you guys. And to anyone who might be new, if this is your first visit to my channel, you're more than welcome. If it's the Fires of Midway that's brought you here, I will be adding more videos concerning this game to the channel soon. I've also done an introduction, which I uploaded previously. So do stay tuned for that. If it's wargaming in general that you're interested in, please have a wander around. I hope you'll find something else that interests you. You're more than welcome anyway. But whoever you are, wherever you're watching from, thank you again very, very much, and I look forward to seeing you in the next video. Take care. Bye.